animating the intro to a podcast is the single most important thing an animator can do. And I'm going to show you the unspeakable things that I learned in that process about design, animation, and the nature of life itself. The Sloppy Joes is one of my favourite podcasts. Some podcasts claim to talk about what's really important.
Can we talk about like the political and economic state of the world right now?
Other podcasts actually do.
Have you graded Halloumi recently?
No.
Joe. We've been lied to.
My inspiration was Terry Gilliam's iconic animations for Monty Python's Flying Circus, an absurd stop-motion mix of photo collage and illustration. Now I am but one man, and the podcast's intro music is 20 seconds long, which in animation seconds is an eternity. So the concept needed to be time efficient-ish. I came up with a whole lot of ideas and sketches of the hosts, of recurring gags, some scene ideas, and what the overall story could be for the animation. What I landed on was having the hosts' heads as illustrated cutouts, sprouting angelic wings and ascending higher and higher towards the heavens, getting oh so close, then falling back to Earth. And joining them with angels' wings are about 18 objects that represent key elements, iconic stories from the podcast's lore, like a log from an A0 tree.
Well, because paper's made out of trees, isn't it?
Yes.
So what tree is A0?
What do you think paper is?
The key to this concept was the wings, an element that I could animate once and use it dozens of times throughout the whole animation. What's the secret to a great timing? And that's what the animatic is for. It is the most underrated part of the motion design process. This is the animatic I made, a rough version of the whole animation, just black and white line art of the wings, the heads, and a placeholder for where the objects would go. The goal of the animatic is to get the right timing, to make the big decisions for what is happening when, and for how long, and for how when, and for when else. Timing. I learned just how important the animatic is from the time I spent freelancing at Buck Sydney. The level of their animatics was wild to me at the time. But this is where the whole animation is decided. There are three very important things that an animatic does. One, it lets you see the issues early. You want to learn what's wrong with your animation at the beginning of the process, not at the end. Changing a black and white sketch and basic timing is so much easier than adjusting 200 keyframed layers. Two, it communicates your idea to the client clearly. You do not want to assume the client knows what's going on inside your head. You want to bridge that gap as much as possible. They won't be surprised and then need to demand changes later on in the process when what you give them doesn't match what they imagined in their head. Don't let them imagine, show them in the animatic. And three, the animation process will go much smoother because you know what you're doing. Your time can be spent focusing on making any one scene the best it can possibly be, knowing that it works together in the whole of the animation well. Now it does take a lot more time up front, it does, but that time pays off double with not having to redo work with endless rounds of revisions. You'll have a happier client and a better animation. An animatic is key. The animation now relied on two things to get right. One is the characters/object designs, and the other is animating the wings. Now, I've not animated a lot of wings before. I'm not certain I know why birds don't drop out of the sky like bricks. So I went searching for reference, and I found exactly what I was looking for. This stock 3D animation of a pigeon. Now, it wasn't the most exciting wing animation, but it had the right motion that I wanted for this project. A steady looping flap in one position that I could animate to look like it was flying upward. Not soaring, not gliding, not doing a loop-de-loop, flapping straight up like a feathered helicopter. For the animatic, I just traced over it to communicate that this is the kind of motion it would have, but for the actual animation, I didn't just want to trace over it. Even if it's stock footage that I have the license to use, I wanted this to be as custom made, as human as the time would allow. So I kept the reference to the side and then tried to judge how much the wings were moving between frames and followed the same rough path. It was close, a little wonky, so I drew a mark at the tip of each wing to see if they are following a smooth arc, which I did over another pass, adjusting and exaggerating the wing shapes. Then I did a final clean pass, adding the feathers this time and adjusting the shapes to be more angel-y. I simplified them to have enough feathers to be believable, but not too many that it would take a lifetime to draw them all. These are the final wings, and I know that they wouldn't see their full glory until all the effects and textures were added, and of course, the objects they were attached to. I love poster design. especially object posters made for advertising in the early 20th century. I recently travelled to the far-off land of Germany to gather materials and happened upon an incredible haul of old enamel sign design books for inspiration. Now, I love this kind of imagery: bold shapes, limited colour palette, with a focus of one element front and centre. 100 years old, and their influence is still so clear in modern vector art, decades before Bezier handles were even a dream. I love illustrating like this. I love the challenge of choosing a particular object and making it clearly readable at a small scale with a limited colour palette, and almost sculpting the drawing by adding and removing details to make it effectively appealing within those constraints. Here's one of my dog Kimchi that I think came out particularly well. But for the objects in this project, I'm sticking to grayscale to match the colour palette, leaving the red for the wings and the border. Now, one object from the podcast that I knew needed to be included in this was
Chicken wings.
Chicken wings.
Chicken wings.
Chicken wings.
Now, the challenge there was that a chicken wing that's cooked for human consumption looks either like a chicken leg, a drumstick, or this flat mass. Now, I love drawing chicken legs. They have an undeniable iconic shape, but not the wing. The wing is hard, and even harder to convey in black and white. So I decided it should be the whole 3-part chicken wing. Not really what you'd get when you order wings, but a much more unique shape than either of these. Then I showed it to a friend, and they asked me what it was even meant to be. So I did have to question whether my design was wingy enough at all. I knew it was meant to be a chicken wing. It was a chicken wing in my head before I even put a mark on the paper. But to an outsider, they need to summon that concept from my scribbles. We need to be clear in our designs by including clues. A breadcrumb trail of shapes and forms that leads the audience effortlessly towards that concept. So I adjusted it to this. I thought it had a little more interesting lighting as well, but I still wasn't sure, so I put it to a vote on Instagram. And a whopping 53% preferred this one. So if you don't like it, you only got yourself to blame. Another one that I was proud of was these poppadoms, because they are also a really difficult thing to portray clearly in black and white. They could easily be pancakes or tortillas, already lumpy oval, but I think these do read as poppadoms to the educated observer. I made 18 in total, but I wasn't done with these designs. They needed some effects. To make the animation feel more like a cut-out collage and less like a bunch of animations with styles that didn't match, I needed to separate them more. First, a halftone effect on the objects. A halftone pattern is how printers show the full spectrum of grayscale tones with just black ink, by varying the size of black dots. There is an effect in Photoshop that does this, but I am never using that effect again. There is a much better way. Brady from Texture Labs has created a wonderfully genius method and detailed tutorial on just that. It gives a better result and is really simple to test and adjust in real time. Essentially, it's a layer of a repeated dot pattern set to hard mix. Perfect. There is a really creative solution for full color halftones as well, so check out that video for all the details. I applied that to all the object illustrations and realized at this point that the halftones look way better across gradients than the flat separation of colors that I had been doing. So I added a bit of strategic shading with a soft brush over the top. Now this was a little bit painful to do because I was so happy with some of those choices of where to separate the dark and light and midtones very clearly, but it just didn't look as good. So I had to do it for the sake of the overall animation. Then in After Effects, I added a paper texture from Texture Labs 2. I gave everything a small drop shadow so it appeared to have the thickness of a paper cutout, separate enough from the wings and the backgrounds to start to feel like a collage. But it would all be for naught if I didn't get right the most important element in this animation: the humans. The humans of the Sloppy Joes podcast are Joe, Ethan, and Dom. Now, I could just use screenshots of them from the podcast, but an illustrated portrait has so much more charm. Even with the collage style, I did want these to feel more crafted, as if I'd cut out the illustrations from a magazine rather than a screenshot from a digital camera with modern podcast studio lighting, which wouldn't sell the whimsical nature that I wanted. But again, I'm not made of time, I needed to be effective. So I got references of each of them by examining them frame by frame, and before painting them digitally, I traced the most important proportions of the face as a guide to make sure it did end up actually looking like them, which does feel a little shameful to admit, tracing. But this was the process the late, great Drew Struzan used for his iconic illustrated movie posters. That's what he did to get the likeness that was required.
And there's so much understanding and there's so much mysticism and egos involved in that kind of stuff. Well, I do everything out of my head. Well, good for you. Does it get you what you want? Fine. I need to do portraits of accuracy and I need to do them fast. And this is how I do it.
So that made me feel a little better. When the person's likeness is essential, I'm not going to be taking risks. Especially when the subject can go from Jesus of Nazareth to Russell Brand with a single stroke. But if I followed the references too closely, it would just look like I copied a photo anyway. And at that point, why not just trace the whole thing or use the photo? So I decided to change the lighting of each one to be a bit more interesting, so they were lit from the side facing away. That way, in my translation of the new lighting that I was doing in my head, I was making my own choices for the shapes and for the forms, based on their face structure, but also unavoidably adding my own imperfections. And that forces it to come out with a little more illustrated flavor than the reference images alone, and I also wanted to stylize a few elements like the hair as well. Now, another tip that is really useful in this process is to flip your image often, your drawing, your design, your canvas. It gives you fresh eyes to see the flaws in proportion and composition. We make mistakes that we don't realize and we just get used to seeing them because we are looking at an image for too long. And I will just draw something and have no idea that it is all wonky until I flip it. Then I can see it clearly, I'll make the change, then flip it back and repeat. Now the portraits were done, but they couldn't sit motionless in the endless abyss forever. They needed some charming backgrounds. The 18th and 19th centuries summoned forth some of the most innovative landscape painters, the Romantics, who portrayed the power of nature as an immense, uncontrollable force that man could only briefly stand in, looking upwards and thinking, "Phew, bloody hell." And a recurring theme of the Sloppy Joes podcast was man's relationship with nature.
Do you think a single piece of paper is a tree that someone has planed to the size of a bit of paper and then cut into a square?
Well, what is it then?
You don't.
What is it then?
And I thought these paintings looked pretty and would make nice backgrounds. So in some German museums, I took photos of these, which I can do because the artists are long dead and they're in the public domain. And they just pop nicely behind everything. With all the elements designed, it was finally time to animate them. And because I made all the most important choices in that animatic, this was simple. I of course tidied up the animatic, making a composition for each individual shot, and for the individual flying objects, I made one comp with a design, attached it to a null and animated its position to match the bobbing up and down of the wings. Then simply duplicated that comp and swapped out the object for the next one, adjusting the location of the wings for each. And I had my army of cherubs. For the falling scene, everything was attached to a null, its position went up and fell down. I animated a few individually to fall at different speeds, and removed the wings when the blast came through, which was just a circle with a blur on it for a few frames. They all had a rotation away from the blast as well. And I wanted that rejection blast from heaven to remove the clouds and reveal the cold vacuum of space. I couldn't find a romantic painting of this, but I happened to paint a space background recently, so I used that. And for the final falling scene, they were just 3 cloud images stuck together, which looked like this before I feathered the edges. For the blinking, each head was in its own pre-comp, and I alternated between 2 drawings, one of eyes open and one of eyes closed, that I controlled using hold keyframes. I did the same for timing the lip sync. Hold keyframes for open and for closed. The wing sprouting was just that wing animation slowed down, then animated scaling up. I also added a beam of heavenly light in each scene, slowly getting brighter. And that is just a white solid with some feathered masks, animating the opacity and blending mode set to overlay. On top of everything in the master comp is a few looping textures, some film grain and a slight gate weave. They are my go-tos for adding extra grit and texture and heart and joy to an animation, which you'll be familiar with if you've seen more of my videos on this channel. And before the reveal of the final animation, remember, an animatic solves everything. We always label our layers, and paper is made from pulped, pressed, and cut wood fibers. Also, if you're interested in learning everything I know about design and animation, I teach exactly that across 3 courses, where the students continue to create phenomenal work. That is on my website, benmarriott.com. And here's the full intro.
Welcome to the podcast for the sisters and bros. It will make you laugh from your head to your toes. Talking about their lives, from the highs to the lows. And the name of the title goes, The Sloppy Joes.
Welcome everyone to the Sloppy Joes podcast.
Do you think each piece of paper was a single sheet?
I thought
of
you
wood?
get a trunk down, you get the trunk down, bring it in, and you do it like dead thinly.
And that's
And
a
you
piece of
get it.
paper. It's just
like
one.
do you know how the Spanish do Parma ham?